Hello, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Let me begin with a simple question to set the stage that most of the sales team can relate to. I just want to know how many calls does your team make in a day, and how often do those calls actually turn into a real conversation? You can drop your answers in the chat section. Okay. Right. So, in a day, on an average, at least any sales team makes about 100 or 150 calls. But do all of those get connected? No. And the ratio is really, really low. Most of the outbound teams dial dozens of numbers daily, yet connect with only a handful of prospects who are genuinely willing to talk. The issue isn't lack of effort, it's that calls are often made at the wrong time, from unrecognizable numbers, or without a clear follow up strategy. Hello everyone, I am Kalash Prajapati, product marketing specialist at CallHippo, and I work closely with sales and revenue teams to understand what truly impacts call connect rates across different markets. Today's session, Ringing Smarter, the secret to double call connect rates, is focused on exactly that: how teams can significantly increase real conversations without increasing call volume. To walk us through what is working on the ground and share practical insights from real world outbound teams, I am pleased to introduce our expert speaker, Pranav Bhatnagar, who brings hands on experience in outbound strategy, connect rate optimization with that. Pranav leads the success team at CallHippo, and he is the perfect subject matter expert on this topic. Pranav, over to you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Kalash. Thank you all for joining in. We are just getting started over here today in this near Christmas Friday evening webinar. We are talking about connect rates, which happens to be one of my favorite topics, right? So let's get started. Without further ado, I'll jump right into it and set the tone for the webinar. I think over the course of next 40 minutes to 1 hour, what we are going to discuss is that how we can enhance connect rates, right? And while the slide says that, we just want to double connect rates, I want to 10x connect rates, right? So that's one of the things that we are going to be discussing during the course of the webinar, right? Now, if you would have tried out Call Hippo and talked to me about a year and a half back, right? I would have told you that hey, we are a telephony company, and my core objective of doing a deployment is to enhance connectivity, right? Now we are shifting gears, so we are looking at higher contact rates, and we'll during the course of the webinar talk about what's the difference between pickup rate versus what's the difference between contact rates, and how you can have more meaningful conversations with the customers, right? So let's jump right into it. We are going to keep questions for the end. So, after we are done going through the webinar content, then Kalash is going to open the floor for the questions, and you guys can put your questions in chat or raise your hands and have questions, and we'll take them up, right? So let's jump right into it. Can we go to the first slide, Kalash? Right. So most of the companies that comes to us, and I talk to customers day in and day out, are stuck in this trap of having low connectivity, right? And so what outbound teams generally do is that they would be doing 50 to 100 calls, which is the minimum, right? I go to high volume companies where they're doing somewhere around 250, 300, 400 calls a day, right? And so the idea is that whenever those calls are conducted, the meaningful conversations that you're having with customers is still on the lower side, right? So that's what I call the high effort low conversations trap. And then as a result, what you're doing is that you're allocating a lot of resources to your calling effort, right? But the time, energy, and the budget that's invested is yielding lower ROI, right? So as Call Hippo, what we want to do is that we want to sort of work on that problem with you, and we understood with multiple customer conversations that one of the key levers for an outbound team, key value realization lever for an outbound team is connectivity, right? So we just want to sort of highlight before we jump into, how do we enhance connectivity? We just want to sort of highlight that traditionally I've been dealing with a customer set that has the mindset that more calls equals more conversations, and unfortunately that's not true. Kalash, could we switch to the next slide, please? So while your dialing volume may remain high, right, the pickup rates are low, and the meaningful conversations that you're having with customers are even lower, right? So next up, if you switch to the next slide. Yeah. So here's how you can define call connect rate, right? Before we jump into, how call rate is the connect rate is calculated, and how do we enhance it. Here's how you can calculate call connect rate. So it's basically real conversations that you're having with customers, right? So you may be conducting around 400 calls, but if the real meaningful conversations that you're having with customers still remain on the lower side, then the a lot of effort is wasted over there, right? So you can just go ahead and make classifications. Like one of these customers that I was talking to gave me a very interesting perspective. So he said that we have divided our total call volume into three bands: calls that are exceeding 2 minutes, calls that are exceeding 5 minutes, and the calls that are exceeding 10 minutes, right? And so why I find that interesting is because the actual customers that you're interested in are the customers that are having conversations with you that are longer, right? So 10-minute customers from a lead qualification perspective, 10-minute customers are the customers that are going to be converting for you, that has a high probability of conversion. And then, 5 minutes and 2 minutes. So you can use that mechanism for lead qualification, right? And the meaningful dialogue that you are having with the customer, higher the probability of them converting, right? So you can go ahead and have these kind of classifications. Actually, in Call Hippo, what we do is that we show you a dashboard of all of the calls that have been conducted, and we'll also show you calls that are above 30 seconds, 1 minute. You can define that band, whatever band you want to give it. So this customer, as I'm saying, gave it bands that I want to map calls that are more than 2 minutes, more than 5 minutes, and more than 10 minutes. And that's how you sort of draw meaningful insights out of your data, that and use that for lead qualification, right? Um, can we switch over to the next slide? Yep. So I want to highlight a case study. We've been working closely with Lead Squared for about quite some time now. And so Lead Squared wanted to use our parallel dialer for promoting or for boosting their outbound speed, right? So the parallel dialer is a wonderful feature that CallHippo has. It's a product that sort of, does auto dialing and boosts your outbound speed. So that's exactly what Lead Squared wanted. I think they came to us, and their major concern was that their uh, missed call rate was high and their response rate was high. And what we suggested them, that you go ahead and use our parallel dialer. We also sort of suggested a couple of features along with that, and the end outcome was that their missed call rate reduced by 18% and their overall response time dropped by 40%, right? So that's one of the case studies that we have for you, a real life example where Lead Squared boosted their response time by 40%. And so if you look at the metrics that matter to them, right? the response time reduction led to an increase in overall retention, customer retention, led to an increase in CSAT, right? So it's having feedback effects into multiple metrics that actually matter to Lead Squared as a company, right? And that can be a similar setup for your company. So as outbound teams, what we are looking at is that we should have an outreach mechanism that yields us high connectivity rates so that we are able to connect with customers and have meaningful conversations and drive conversions from there on and boost revenue, right? Revenue is everything that we are looking for. So then that kind of mechanism can also be set up for each of your teams, wherein we can build your outreach efforts in such a way that they are optimized for high connectivity rates. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah. So, as I said, right, so connect rate is different people have different definitions of connect rates. And so I want to, before we jump into, how we enhance connect rates, I just want to standardize how we are defining connect rate over here. So connect rate is pretty simple. Completed calls divided by total number of calls into 100, right? It's a very standard mathematical formula. And so as an example, if you're making 100 calls in a day and 30 of those are connecting beyond a certain time frame, your connect rate is 30%. Or as the slide says, that your connect rate can be 16% or whatever, right? So that's the standard formula for connect rate. Now let's move ahead and learn more about this metric in order to enhance this metric, right? So if we move on to the next slide, you'll see that there are confusions around connect rate. As I said, that every person has their own definition of connect rates. So pickup rate is just that a call is connected, right? And pickup rate or answer rate does not signify that that's a meaningful conversation that you're having with the customer, right? Now, what we are looking at is real conversations that you're having with the customers, right? So then connect rate defines that for you. So if you're pulling up data and building a dashboard out of it, so what you want to do is you want to see that what were my total number of calls, but what were my total number of calls above a certain time frame, which is human answered calls and real conversations that I'm having with my customers, right? And so that's how you would calculate conversion rate and build dashboards around it in tools like Power BI. CallHippo would give you a lot of those dashboards. But if you have internal data warehousing tools like Power BI or CRMs like Salesforce and HubSpot, you can house that data over there as well, right? And so your conversion rate would measure outcomes after the conversation. So once you have a meaningful conversation, as I said, what we would want to do from there is that we would want to sort of define a follow-up cadence, which we are going to talk about later on. We want to define a follow-up cadence that eventually leads to a conversion, right? Great. Moving on to the next slide. Right. So connect rate is one of the metrics that we work with quite a lot within the telephony industry. Connect rate is all that matters. If we look at our data, I've been working in the industry for about a couple of years now. And if you look at our data, connectivity and connect rate is one of the major value realization levers, right? So it is one of the levers that would make make a customer stick to you, right? So that's how important connectivity is to the telephony industry, right? And so call hippo's goal is to enhance contact rates for you guys so that you're able to get maximum ROI out of the product, right? So let's define certain bands for connect rates, that what is the definition of a good connect rate, what is the definition of a bad connect rate, so on and so forth. So let's talk about auto dialing campaigns first. So for example, if with an auto dialing campaign you're receiving 10 to 15% connectivity and that is doubled by a product, it doubles your conversations that you're having with the customers, then that's obviously a win, right? That's like 100% increase within the connectivity that you're getting, right? Another example that I want to quote is that we were working with this company that's in the hospitality sector. they were using a product, the US team was using another product, the UK team was using another product. So their idea of coming to CallHippo was that they wanted to centralize all of their conversations, right? And they took up the auto dialer with us. And I think with the auto dialer earlier, they were getting somewhere around 12% connectivity, which CallHippo enhanced to 16 to 20% connectivity, right? And overall is what I'm talking about. So across US and UK calling, we took their connectivity to 20%, and they were able to connect with customers and have meaningful conversations with them. And that is how we created value, right? So if you're increasing the number of meaningful conversations that you have, then that's a win. And those conversations are then feeding back into the pipeline that you're creating, right? So if you're having 12% meaningful conversations versus 20%, so your pipeline overall top of the funnel is anyhow growing, right? And then better connects would lead you to better qualification and forecasting of data, right? I hope this is resonating with you. Moving on to the next slide, Kalash. Right. So now we are talking about industry benchmarks. Now, under 10%, if you're getting something like that, right? So I would suggest that, that could either indicate two things that, the data set that you're calling on is not that great. So you want to revisit the quality of the data that you're calling on. B, it could also uh, say that, hey, your timing is not correct, right? So in a auto dialer campaign, what happens is that the pacing of the campaign has to be correct. Otherwise, it could lead to abandoned calls. It could lead to, call failures, so on and so forth. So your pacing of the auto dialing campaign has to be exact, which is why CallHippo offers a couple of features related to that. So when teams are calling auto dialing for the first time, what I suggest is that we have a feature called auto pacing, right? So I suggest that we can start off with that, and then tweak your campaign limits from there on to sort of establish that what gets you the optimum connectivity, right? So then we've got something called auto pacing. We also have something called fixed ratio. And fixed ratio is something that most more experienced people with auto dialing can use, whereas auto pacing is something that would sort of define an automatic timing for your campaign. And that's something that I advise to people who are just starting off with auto dialing and want to boost their efficiency and want to boost their connectivity at the same time. 10 to 20% is quite common in the industry, right? And that means that we are getting good connectivity, but is that the best? So not really. So that still leaves room for optimization, right? And then if you're getting anywhere in the bracket of 20 to 30%, right, it reflects that A, the data that you're calling on may be highly qualified, right? B, the tool is giving you good connectivity. C, I think, if you're able to drive conversions from there, then, that's also a function of having a good sales process and discipline within the sales team, right? And then 30 to 40% is something like a wow, right? So I think so far the customers that I've worked with, at least the mid-market enterprise teams that we usually work with, still lie in the bracket of anywhere, I would say, between 20 to 40%, which is why they're sticking around with us, because we bring them really high connectivity. And so out of all the customers, I think one of the, as I said, levers that they want to really target is the connect rate that they're able to establish, right? Now, I think since on the previous slides, we've already discussed that what is the definition of a connect rate and what are the industry benchmarks. So next, I think we would talk about how connectivity can differ globally. And we would also talk about, some of the mechanisms to enhance those connect rates, right? Um, my team works across multiple time zones, right? So we would work from the NZ Australia time zone to the US time zone. So we work across multiple time zones, and we can see geographic differences between the connect rates, right? So, the calling culture would vary from region to region, and that is one of the biggest determinants of connectivity, right? One of the other determinants is that, the decision makers may not be available within a certain time slot, right? So, I think you would get higher connect rates at certain time slots, whereas you would not get that many connects during other time slots. And then we'd also talk about those time slots and those differences on a later slide. The tone and pacing that would work for one market may not work for the other, right? And that totally depends upon what your local language is, and what is the cadence at you speak at which you speak, and what is the pace at which you speak. So all of those factors are some global differences that would affect your connectivity, right? Now, these are all factors that are related to calling culture, right? But I would also like to highlight certain factors that are more technical in nature. So, for example, if you look at certain countries, right, the VoIP restrictions over there would be such that you're not able to establish good connectivity, or there may be audio quality issues in certain geographies, and we've experienced this with a lot of products, right? I'm sure that if you're on this webinar, you've been through a bunch of dialers that you've wanted to deploy for your team, and then issues related to audio quality, or some VoIP challenges within a certain geography may crop up, right? With any tool every now and then. So let's move on to the next slide, and we are going to talk about, now that we have understood these global market differences, we are going to talk about how you can succeed in different countries, right? So, for example, US is basically about speed and relevance, and that creates direct value, right? Whereas UK would respond to a more consultative and respectful engagement. If you're looking at Canada, they would value warmth, trust. And if you're looking at Australia, then honesty and natural conversation. And then finally coming to India, so they would generally value patience and a relationship continuity, right? Now, all of these factors, I'm not generalizing them in any way, but these are factors that are from our experience and from the customer base that we work with. So this in no way means that, these are general determinants of what can influence your connectivity across regions, right? Moving on to the next slide. Right. So now on the next slide, what we want to do is we want to sort of talk about how do we enhance connect rates, and what are the factors that are determinants of connect rates, and how you can work with those factors to ultimately see a quantum increase in your connect rates, right? Now, one of the things that I have seen working with clients is that if you're calling within high availability windows, right? And if you're very cognizant of the time zone that you're calling in, right? So that would obviously enhance your connect rate. I am usually more prone to picking up my calls somewhere around lunchtime, early in the morning, or later in the evening, right? So that's just me, but I'm saying that, other people may behave like me as well, and they may have pockets of times where they're more prone to pick up calls rather than just cancel them out, right? During the day, we are all caught up in meetings, caught up in our day-to-day work, caught up in a lot of other projects that we would have, so we are not likely to take that many calls. And all of us anyways have very short attention spans and short patience spans for any sort of calls that are coming in, where people are reaching out to us to sell something, right? So we've all experienced that and been there. Now, the second part is that if you have consistent numbers that you're allocating to agents, and having consistent caller identities, that helps a lot, right? So, for example, if you had a call that was coming from any company, right? If there's a random number, or if it is coming from CallHippo, so you would be like, okay, that's coming from CallHippo, so I recognize that number, and I'm going to pick that up because you are a CallHippo customer, right? So you want to pick that up and have that conversation with a customer success manager or an SDR or whatever it is, right? Um, Following up is one of the key elements of the sales process, right? So any of the customers that we have conversations with, I always tell my team to follow up rigorously without irritating the customer. But follow up is something that is one of the key elements of a sales process, right? So if you follow up on a regular basis, that is likely to improve your engagement with the customer. And of course, when before engagement, you're able to establish a connect with the customer, but it increases your engagement with the customer. That increases the conversion probability, right? Giving good context before each call, of course. So if you're reaching out to someone, if you just say that, hey, I'm speaking from CallHippo and I want to discuss a proposition with you regarding XYZ on how you can enhance your connectivity. So, that sets up a good conversation. That sets up the tone for a good conversation, right? Because you've established what you want to achieve during that conversation at the start. And the person has the capability to listen to you more, right, at that point in time. And then if you're able to maintain good call quality, as I said, that there are certain geographies that are prone to audio quality issues. There are certain disturbances in audio if the person is not able to hear you clearly. All of those problems would impact your connect rate, right? So if you're able to maintain good call quality and through any tool that you're using, then of course that is likely to enhance your connect rate. Moving on to the next slide. Timing. Timing optimization, right? So I think I briefly talked about this on the previous slide, mentioning that I'm more prone to pick up calls in certain pockets, and most people would behave like me. So if you're calling midweek, right? So it's been experienced statistically that midweek calls would outperform the start of the week and the end of the week. Start of the week, we are all busy with Mondays. We are having Monday blues, and then Fridays are we just our weekend. We've already gotten into the weekend mode, so we don't really want to pick up calls. And midweek, if you're reaching out to customers between Tuesday, Wednesday, so that's likely to get you a higher connect rate if as opposed to start and end of the week, right? And you can experiment this. So you can run campaigns that are midweek, start of the week, and end of the week. And you can see that, if there is any sort of consistent patterns that emerge out of that data, right? What CallHippo would actually do is that it would give you comprehensive dashboards that sort of establish that what is the connectivity and what is the total call volume that you're achieving on each of the days. And we will talk more about how you can utilize those insights into your sales process at a later point in time. But the major takeaway being that midweek calls are more likely to be picked up rather than start of the week and the end of the week, right? In terms of the timing, like during the day, a late morning shows a higher answer rate and also a higher engagement rate, right? And this is just patterns that are emerging out of data. Right? I don't have the logic behind these, right? As I said, that I'm more likely to pick up if you call me early in the morning. I'm like, who's calling me now? Or later in the day during the evening because I'm off work and I'm likely to pick up any call that comes in. But what data shows is something different, is that late morning shows a higher answer and engagement rate. And then if you want to sort of establish like a connectivity heat map, so you would want to track your connectivity rate by hour, and then I would also tell you to track your connectivity rate by the day to sort of establish that which are the pockets that are giving you the best connectivity, right? I remember working with this customer, a very popular SaaS company in India, and they were transitioning from another tool to us. And the person, the POC, we had a very interesting conversation about he wanted a heat map of connectivity rates by hour. And I just asked him that what was the use case. So he's like, I want to establish that which are my high connect rate hours within the Eastern time zone versus which are my high connect rate hours in Pacific time zone, Mountain time zone, so on and so forth, right? And so you can also establish like a global heat map of which are the pockets of time where you're getting the highest connect rate within a particular country, right? Because different countries may have different patterns. And while I've not put that on the slide, but if you're likely to sort of call in the US in a certain time frame, then that will give you good connectivity, right? Versus if you're calling in any of the European countries, UK, Spain, France, all of those. So they would have different connect rates and different pockets of time where connect rates are likely to be higher. So it's very interesting to look into that data and look at the patterns that are emerging out of that. Why I cannot give you generalizations is the fact that, this data is very unique and it depends upon account to account. So your connectivity rates within a particular geography may vary considerably depending upon which month are we in, which day are we in, which hour are we in, which slots are we calling in. There are a bunch of factors that can affect connectivity, and it's very, very interesting that all of the call logs that we get in CallHippo, what my support team and even my team, what we do is that we do an in-depth analysis through various AI tools to recognize the patterns that are emerging within that data, right? And that's the data we want to show you. That's the data we want to talk about when we are getting on quarterly business reviews or monthly business reviews or executive business reviews. That's the data we want to talk about because we want to understand that how exactly are we contributing value to you guys. Moving on to the next slide. Caller IDs. It's very important for us to recognize the numbers, right? Now, if you're in India and if you're with an Indian carrier, we get a spam notification through Truecaller or anyways, other carriers also have such notifications, and you automatically disconnect that calls, right? So it's very important for you to be whitelisted over there. And if any of your numbers show up as spam, CallHippo has a policy, has a feature of auto replacing those numbers, right? And the numbers that are popping up on your screen have to be trustworthy. If they show your company name, they show your business name, that again establishes trust with the customer. And as I said, that if a random number were to call me versus there would be a call from HubSpot, and I would be like, oh, my HubSpot CSM is calling me because I use HubSpot, or my Salesforce CRM is calling me because I use Salesforce, right? And so you would automatically want to pick that up and want to talk to the customer success manager about the product, right? So caller ID is really important, and the strategy you have over there is really important. If we talk about CallHippo in particular, I just want to give you some background on some of the features that we have, right? So we optimize your connect rates by auto replacing your numbers. So auto replacement is a feature that we launched after a lot of discussions with our customers. And so all of the numbers that are giving you connectivity beyond a certain threshold, right, below a certain threshold, we would go ahead and replace them, right? Another thing that we do is that we have an auto rotate mechanism. So we would go ahead and rotate the numbers that you're calling from so that all of your calling volume is bifurcated to numbers and there is no single number that is getting a lot of call volume that's getting a lot of call volume, because that's likely to spam the number, right? So then your numbers wouldn't have a longer life cycle. But with auto rotate, what you're doing is that you're allocating multiple DIDs to a particular team or a particular individual, and that sort of optimizes your connectivity, right? So these are some of the features how we optimize your connectivity. Now, follow-ups, as I said, one of the most important things. Most successful connects, right, can turn into cold conversations if the follow-up mechanism is not right. So we want to go ahead and establish a robust follow-up mechanism, right? Because once you've had connects, right, you want to keep reiterating the conversation, that meaningful conversation, and then only it leads to a conversion, right? So the value reiteration is very important. Today, if a customer signs up with CallHippo, the standard process from there is that, it would go to our sales team, and our sales team would give you reiterations of value by showing you new features that would enhance your connectivity, reduce the probability of spamming, enhancing your conversions, right? So my sales team would keep on giving you the value levers till the time you officially sign up with CallHippo, right? So a robust follow-up process is actually very important, right? And if your spacing is right, as we talked about in an earlier slide, that if you're auto dialing and your spacing is right, then that would give you a good connectivity anywhere in the bracket of 30 to 40%. Now, if you're able to establish that connectivity, then it's upon you to have a robust follow-up process and maximize conversions from there, right? So that there are no missed opportunities, there are no cold conversations. So that really matters a lot. Moving on to the next slide. Pre-call research, right? Another thing that I keep reiterating to my team. So if you're going on a call with the customer, the laying down of the context is very important, right? And then if you're able to give me or able to give anyone a one data point that sort of turns the conversation around, right? That's gonna stick in my head for a while. So I was working with this hospitality customer that I mentioned earlier. And so the first thing that I told them was that we used to work with their competitor as well, and we had contributed enhanced the connect rate of the competitor by a certain percentage. And so in my earlier conversation, I think one of my opening lines was that we work with this company XYZ, which is your competitor, and we sort of enhance the connect rate for them by X%, right? And so that person was obviously hooked, and so he was interested, very interested in the fact that how we can go ahead and establish the same mechanism so that we are able to get that quantum increase within the connect rates, right? So if you're able to give me that one data point as a hook which makes me stick to the conversation, and that's going to be in my head for a while, so of course I'm more likely to come to a particular product, right? So that's one thing. uh, Another thing is that we are in the era of data, right? Data is everywhere around us. There are AI tools, and data is everywhere around us. So we need to draw insights from that data. And so if you're able to draw insights like that, okay, within the Eastern time zone, this is the pocket, which is the busiest, which gets me the highest connectivity, that helps in capacity planning. So I want to allocate more of my agents to that particular pocket of time. I want to ensure that within that time frame, there are no missed calls. All of my best agents are there. We're having meaningful conversations, because at the end of the day, things are going to slack off. And then if I don't even have that many agents, that just makes good sense in terms of capacity planning, right? And then you can go ahead and establish a framework over time that that sort of works for you. So I was talking to this customer recently, and he was a data scientist. So he was trying to draw insights for a SaaS company that, how many connects does it take for me to actually convert a customer? And I was like, that's a fabulous question, right? So then you want to develop that mechanism. And when we dug into the data, just to give you some context around that, when we dug into the data, um, those number of attempts to convert a customer varied team wise, and that was fabulous insight that I had for the first time with this particular customer, right? And so insights like these would help you establish that, team wise, what are the number of attempts that are converting, right? And what are the things that are resonating with your customers, right? Do I get more customer response on persistent follow-ups, or do I get more customer response when I have a good first conversation and when I'm able to establish a hook that sort of makes them stay with my product, right? So it's very important to ask those questions, then go ahead and analyze data, and then sort of establish the patterns that are majorly emerging out of the data, right? Moving on to the next slide, Kalash. Common mistakes to avoid, right? So what kills your connect rates? if you're not checking out time zones, what's the local time? That totally kills your connectivity, right? And so, which is why I think in the earlier days of Call Hippo, we established a feature called Global Connect, right? So what that does is that it's going to show you what the time zone is within the country that you're calling, right? So for example, if I'm right now calling to New York, so it's going to show me the time zone of New York, and it's going to tell me that, hey, if this is the right time to call New York or not, right? If I'm calling Brazil, it will give me the same data, right? So that's very important. You want to check local time zones when you're initiating a campaign, right? Um, I also talked about your caller ID strategy. So if you're allocating a certain number to your agent, don't change them too frequently. Have a caller ID that sort of has your business name so that if it's getting across to the customer, there's trust established. Um, Audio quality kills a conversation, kills your connect rate, right? So if you have poor audio quality and the customer is just not able to hear you, they are likely to not pick up your phone again, right? So if you've had a conversation where the audio quality was not great, trust me, 99% of the times, they're not going to pick up your call again, right? So you want to establish contact with the first time. That's how important that call is. You may be making calls on a day-to-day basis, and you sort of don't realize the importance of it. But if you don't connect with them the first time, they're unlikely to pick up your call the second time, right? And if you don't follow up after establishing a connect, then that's just going to be a missed opportunity, and that just doesn't make good sense, right? Now, there are certain metrics to track. Connect rate is the broader bucket that we are talking about. And we've talked about multiple factors on previous slides as well, but I just want to sort of drill down the fact that we want to track connectivity by hour, right? So you want to establish what are the pockets of time where you're getting the highest connectivity, right? Peak windows, as you want to call them. Then you want to establish connect rate by day as well. What are the days where you're likely to receive higher connectivity, right? And this is across analyzing your data. So you would want to analyze data at least for 4 to 5 weeks before figuring out a pattern over there, right? What are the meaningful conversations that you're having per hour? As I said, in Call Hippo, as in other tools as well, right? The definition of meaningful conversation depends upon you. Your meaningful conversation may be more than 2 minutes. My meaningful conversation may be more than 60 minutes. We have an edtech client that we work with, and their calling volume per se is not that much, but the meaningful conversations are really high. You would have 1 hour conversations with people, and talk about various packages that would help their child go ahead and get education abroad, so on and so forth. Those are real meaningful conversations. So I always give that example that their total, if you look at their total calling volume, not that much, but then the meaningful conversations that they're having with the customer is stellar. So then that's what we all aim to have. You can have high calling volume plus a high connectivity rate plus high meaningful conversations. That's what Call Hippo aims at, right? So you want to track what are the meaningful conversations that we are having per hour, and you also want to measure productivity of the agents, right? And then, as I said, average attempts to reach prospects, average attempts to convert a deal, right? So all of that kind of data matters a lot. And if you're able to establish some common patterns from this data by an analysis of at least 4 to 5 weeks, right? So then you're likely to go ahead and base your calling SOPs totally on data, right? Moving on to the next slide. So here's what I propose. We are in the era of challenges as well, right? So I'd say that we are in the era of data, but if you go to any sort of social media tool, right, there would be challenges all around. So I'm throwing up a 4 week improvement challenge for all of you guys over here, right? And this is a very practical execution strategy that we have. Um, we worked with 4,500 customers so far, right? And so I think there are some common patterns that have emerged, right? And so you want to establish most customers, would go into two buckets. They're either coming to us for the first time, they're establishing new processes, they're new companies, and then there is a larger bucket of customers that are transitioning from tools. And whenever they're transitioning from another tool, you're likely to have a pain point, right? So you want to establish that where you're at currently, right? And you want to identify the gaps in the current situation. To give you an example, one of the customers that I was working with, as I said, was 12% connectivity in an auto dialing campaign. They wanted to switch from that product majorly because of two reasons. They had a high abandoned call rate. And then they came to CallHippo, and I worked with them to sort of establish the right pacing, and also do a few tweaks around the number of agents that they had, and that took their connectivity from 12% to 20%, right? But a large part of my working with them involved around understanding the pain points and the common pitfalls that they may be getting into, which is getting them their 12% connectivity, right? So that's one of the major starting points. You want to establish what's your current performance landscape like and what's the gap around it, right? And then you can adjust, as I said, that for this particular customer, I adjusted the timing, made a few tweaks around the number of agents they would have available at a certain point in time, um, made sure that they are not changing numbers too frequently, because when you're initiating an auto dialing campaign, if your calling volume is really high, the probability of a number being spammed remains high as well, right? So you need to get your timing and caller ID strategy right. And then in week 3, what you could do is that you could have structured follow-up sequences. Um, and you could go ahead and have follow-up sequences that matter to the customer. So you can have follow-up sequences through various channels: email, WhatsApp, calling, right? So as I said at the start of the webinar, that Call Hippo used to be like a telephony company, but now we are your communication partner. So if you want to do any sort of WhatsApp outreach, or you want to do any sort of SMS outreach, or do you want to do any sort of email outreach, all of those channels are housed within CallHippo, right? And primarily we are offering you um, connect rates through calling, but then these are all of the other channels that are very popular these days, and all of those channels are also incorporated within CallHippo, giving you a total connectivity rate across channels as well, right? And then finally, what you could do is that you could keep on analyzing this data and make tweaks to your approach. It's very important. So whenever I work with customers, usually our onboarding cycle lasts between 3 to 4 weeks before a customer gets stabilized, right? And what we want to do is constantly monitor data during this time and refine the kind of results that they're getting through that, right? Um, Moving on to the next slide. And so these are just some ways CallHippo can help you, right? So some of the features I think I've already talked about: analytics, call analytics, which are time-based, which help you identify peak hours and which help you identify peak days. For all of the customers that have an incoming use case, Sticky Agent is a very interesting feature. So what Sticky Agent would do is that it would sort of, so if you've initiated a first contact with a customer, it would make sure that you get routed to that same agent, so that the conversation that you're having turns out to be meaningful. We also provide you a bunch of local and mobile numbers across geography to enhance the trust that you're building with the customer, because if you're calling from a local number, then the likely chances of pickup are to be more, rather than if you're calling from any other geography number, right? Now, all of this data that is housed inside CallHippo is also carrying over to your CRM, right? So how are we enriching data is one of the questions that all of the companies have. Now, all of this calling data, when it feeds into your CRM, it brings in additional details related to that particular lead, and you can use our click to call feature, which sort of which improves efficiency, I think, by 23% at least, right? So you can use our click to call feature with our CRM integration. And so that increases efficiency by 23%. And you can go ahead and enrich your data, enrich your calling data, right? Um, One of the major things that people like about CallHippo, whenever I talk with them, is that we provide superior call quality, and we work with global leaders within the telephony industry as carriers to get that call quality. And so you would have lesser dropped calls, unclear calls, or audio issues. All of that are not a thing with CallHippo. And then finally, routing flows is another thing that CallHippo specialize in. We have interestingly enough launched some AI features that sort of intelligently route to teams, intelligently route to agents. So you can have various workflows related to call routing within CallHippo, right? Now, I'm very conscious of the fact that we are just about there in terms of the time. So I'm going to open the floor for some questions. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box, and I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you so much, Pranav. Thank you so much for such an insightful discussion all around the call connect rates and those 4 week plan. It was super amazing. So here to audience again, the question we are welcoming your questions. Please feel free to drop it in the chat section below, or you can also drop your questions on our question section. We got one query from Rajat Kumar. Sometimes Call Hippo experiences technical glitches due to which calls do not go through, and for some leads, call recordings are not captured. So, Rajat, for this, I want to say, Pranav, do you want to say something to Rajat?
Rajat, I think we've had a very data focused discussion, right? So I'm happy to analyze data for you and look at the call recordings that haven't gone through. One of the ways to get this addressed is I'm not sure if you've tried reaching out to our support team. So you could write to support@callhippo.com, or if you're within the panel within the Call Hippo dashboard, there is this pop-up window wherein you can also access our chat support, right? Most of our agents are available 24 into 7, right? And they're available across various time zones. So whichever time zone you're in and are experiencing problems, our agents would be there to help you, right? Happy to look into that for you. Any other questions?
Pranav, we have one more question, that how to protect your number from getting flagged as spam, because I tried doing outbound for my business, but there is this question, but there has been this issue that again and again my number gets flagged as spam, and sometimes I feel face difficulty doing getting the responses from customers. They just don't pick up the call even.
That is a very common problem. And that's not only like a common problem for you as a business or for us as a telephony vendor, but it's a common problem across the industry, right? So then there are a couple of things that Call Hippo does to optimize that. So one of the things is that if you're calling to US as a region, right, then we have an add-on called Spam Watch, right? So which will give you the probability of a number getting spammed. We also show you like a spam notification when you've hit your daily threshold limit. So if you look at the industry literature, what the literature says is, research data says is that if you're conducting more than 70 calls through a number, right? So the moment you hit that 70 calls threshold, your connectivity starts declining. So then what Call Hippo does is that it gives you a notification that 70 calls have already been done through this number. Now I suggest you switch a number and then carry your calls out through another number, which will give you better connectivity, right? So that's another thing that we do. One of my favorites is something called auto rotate, right? And what this would do is that there are a couple of ways you can work with auto rotate, right? So what you can do is that, for example, if there is a US team, right? And so instead of there are 5 agents in the team, so you allocate individual numbers to each of those agents, and then you can keep some spare numbers, and we would enable auto rotate for you. and these numbers would keep on rotating. So what happens is that if you're conducting 100 calls or 200 calls, all of these calls that you're conducting, this volume gets bifurcated within the numbers that you have. So the probability of the number being spammed uh, declines, right? One last thing that I would like to say on that is that yes, if your calling volume is huge across a geography, the number would be spammed at a certain point in time, right? We can't prevent that. That's a virtual reality. You can also use something called auto replacement, right? Which would help you replace that number as soon as the connectivity starts declining. So that again optimizes your connectivity. And thanks for bringing this up because, optimizing connectivity is one of the problems that we've been working on for quite some time now. And since you asked that, I'm sure other people on the webinar would be having same problems and would be able to relate to that. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pranav. I think that was a very in-depth clarification. And if still any of you has any confusion with respect to your outbound or inbound calls, please feel free to reach out our team. You'll be with, I think there are no more questions, Pranav, so we are good to wind up the session. It was a really comprehensive one. Thank you so much for attending the webinar, everybody. Thank you so much, Pranav, for being such a great speaker. You'll get your webinar recording. So if in just in case you want to refer to it once again and revisit the entire discussion, we'll be sending the webinar recording to you over email along with the thank you mail. If you have any more questions, if anything comes up later, please feel free to reply to that mail, or you can also contact our sales team or book a demo with us. You can see the contact details on the screen. Thank you so much once again. Have a happy weekend. And here we are winding up the session. Have a good evening.